Hello, my name is LaTiffany Butler. I'm a parent at Tulsa Educare. The staff and the children have made me and my kids feel so welcome. The teachers are loving and very skilled at what they do. Tulsa Educare means to me a safe, loving environment, and they don't judge no matter your race or your background. I love Tulsa Educare, and I'm glad that I brought my boys.
Educare means to me, it means helping the children gain their learning experience and helping them be more independent and work on their safety and their manners.
Para mí Educare significa mucho. Yo y mi esposo estamos solos en este país como muchísimas familias. No tenemos familia a quien confiarle a nuestro bebé, y entonces al dejar a nuestro hijo en manos de gente con tanta experiencia, nos sentimos capaces de cumplir con todas las obligaciones del trabajo o de la casa, o mil obligaciones que genera tener un niño pequeño, desde ir a hacer groceries o hacer las tareas del hogar. El niño está aprendiendo en el centro. Le enseñan muchísimas cosas, buenos modales, cómo comer, desde cepillarse los dientes, desde tener un ambiente sano y en el que el niño pueda desarrollar lectura, habilidades de arte. Para mí, Educare ha hecho una diferencia grandísima, sobre todo en esta pandemia, donde uno buscaba dónde dejar los niños y todo era tan difícil. Educare ha sido impecable, una higiene, buscaron la forma de cómo aislar los bebés para que estén bien, y para mí, mi familia Educare ha sido un cambio grandísimo en el día a día, en el poder cumplir con todo lo que demanda tener un bebé pequeño. Para nosotros ha sido una gran bendición. Gracias, Educare.
My name is Shirley Nelson, and my son goes to Educare E4. When Levi first started, he was shy and very quiet unto himself. I was assured that his teachers worked closely with him, and they also provided me the tools that I needed to actually help him to open up more. And since then, he's so vibrant, outgoing. He smiles a lot, and he's doing so good in his education, his numbers and everything. He's excited about learning, and he loves his teachers. He asks about them every day. He comes in, he's excited about his friends and his teachers, and that's just such a blessing to see him just blossom into this child that I know he could be. And he's just so outgoing and so loving, and I'm just so blessed to have Educare in me and my son's life.
Hola a todos. Bueno, cuando yo pienso en Educare, pienso en que en una satisfacción inmensa. Educare me ha dado tranquilidad en la vida, que mis dos hijos hayan podido hacer parte de este programa tan lindo. También pienso en la palabra dedicación, cariño, amor, porque todo lo que Educare le ha brindado a mis hijos es eso. Son bases para que sean unas personitas más preparadas y puedan ser mejores niños en el futuro. Y también con respecto al staff y a las profesoras, desde el principio me he sentido muy cómoda, porque dejar a mis hijos en manos de personas tan preparadas, tan cariñosas, tan especiales, no tiene nombre. Realmente el staff y la calidad humana que yo he conseguido en Educare, pienso que no se puede comparar, es irreemplazable. O sea, de verdad que la calidad humana que tienen ahí es excelente. Tú dejas a tus hijos y tú sientes que en verdad se preocupan por tus hijos, que están bien cuidados, que les dan amor, que les dan cariño. Aparte de la preparación y del conocimiento, tú sientes que tus hijos realmente están protegidos en Educare. Entonces, no tenemos más que agradecimiento con Educare, no tenemos más que sentimientos de satisfacción, de cariño. Todos los sentimientos bonitos se nos pasan a la cabeza cuando nos hablan de Educare. y de todo el sistema tan lindo que tienen para tantos niños que realmente lo necesitan.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is now day 3, our last day of an amazing conference. And I cannot think of a better way to end our time together for our national meeting. You know, in all of our sessions, we've had discussions about the good, the bad, and the painful. But all of the pains that we did discuss, because of who we are in our leadership and because of who we lead and who we lead for, these are all opportunities for us to invite in purpose and joy. And so Dr. Jax is the perfect person to bring about our joy. I met her about 10 years ago when I worked in my former organization. And in full transparency, I was a mess professionally, personally, and we had this homework to do, this Clifton Strength assessment, and I had gotten up at 3 o'clock in the morning to make it in Manhattan on time, and I was not in a good mood. And it was time for our one-on-one meeting, and I walk in the office and I see this woman here, and she's so full of joy, and I was not at all. And I'm like, one of us is not leaving this office alive today. And she instantly saw me and put aside the assessments, put aside the profession, and understood that Nikki needed joy, the joy that she could give me. And I just spilled my soul to her, this stranger. And she assessed that I had all of these boxes that I was carrying, and it was full of stuff that was not mine. And her question to me, which I say is life-changing, she says, well, why won't you just take your arms back and let the boxes fall? And I was appalled. I'm like, oh my God, I could never do that. And what she told me was that if the owners of the stuff in the box do not reach their own arms out to save their own stuff, it really wasn't important enough for me to continue to burden myself down. And so that's where I began my journey. She made sure that I made a pit stop to vulnerability, which was so hard and it was soul snatching for me. But she stayed with me for months and months and months while I did that work. But I noticed that once I pulled myself back and, you know, the stuff in the boxes, it spilled all over the ground and the owners of the stuff didn't pick it up. So I was then free to be authentically me, right? And I was then free to start to look for my own joy. I was now able to choose joy. And Dr. Jax and I have this wonderful relationship where I always tell her, you know, I had to choose joy, especially in the storm, especially when it was hardest for me. And so I am so proud to introduce my friend. Her bio is in our materials, but I just thought that my meeting and my journey and relationship with her most properly and most adequately formed and gave you an idea of who she is and what you're about to get. And so I am very, very proud and honored to introduce to you Dr. Jax. She is my partner in joy. Thank you.
Nikki, thank you. You absolutely know that I love the way that your heart shines. I'm so grateful to be here with you, to be here with all of your colleagues today. And might I just say, Educare, how are you breathing? It is time for us to really take a breath on the past few days for you and everything that you have been navigating. It is time for us to give you space to be in your heart in all that you do. That is what we are here to do today. This is about joy in the heart of leadership. It is about joy in your heart as you understand how to live and lead oh so well. Even as I get started, I really want to honor and celebrate. I have never in all the presentations, as somebody has opened up the space for all hearts to come in, heard introductions where people mention love, how loving of a space an organization is offering your child, how loving the staff is, not once, but twice, but if I counted correctly, 6 times. So I feel like it's okay for us to take a breath together on that and come into this shared space to center the true aspect of who you are, because you are designed to love yourself and to live and lead through all the joy within you and each of your hearts. So let's take a breath together to come into the shared space. We'll take a few breaths during our time together. We always do that for our hearts so we can climb out of our mind and get back into who we are because we know how to love ourselves. That is indeed the mechanism that takes happiness, which is all things outside of you, and allows it to be internalized, not just through things outside of you, but through that power of love and therefore joy within. We can say, absolutely, and I'm certain your heart already knows, that leading without love is like breathing without air. That is really what we're here to reignite in your knowingness of who you are. That many times as we maybe can take a breath, we can meditate, we can center who we are, as you all have been focusing on wellness. We know that we can get to those spaces where we can breathe. But how do we pick up and move through the world with that same breath? How do we take on some of those boxes that Nikki talked about, not by turning to fight the good fight, by continuing to breathe all the way to joy? How do we know that we must have access to our breath and therefore our heart in order to live and lead as the leaders that we are designed to be? Well, this is the direction we go. We go into joy, and it goes that way. We detach from the corporate mindset that is outside of us. Those are the unspoken rules that govern our organizations. And although they were designed for corporate America, they've also made their way into nonprofit spaces and places. But remember that you got into Educare. You got into this work not to follow rules, not to have those rules take your breath away, but because your heart was inspired to come to this work. And so we want for you to remember that love is knowing who you are. As you think about cultivating love in the spaces around you, for the children's hearts that you serve, for all of the communities you serve, for the partners that are also sharing space with us today, we invite you to first and foremost center on who you are, because we need you to elevate into the highest vibration, the highest light of who you are and joy. So you center your own sense of self in every breath, because that allows you to tap into that self-love that you've been carrying in your heart since the playground, and it allows you to move forward in that breath. And that's how we can start to detach from all the rules of the corporate mindset that get in the way. Or should we talk about all the balls that keep falling all around us in the midst of a global pandemic? Can we talk about that bullet point list that never seems to end? Can we talk about all the notes that need to be written? All of these things feel like they're in front of our very breath. Balls continuing to fall. Check boxes mounting. Even as we try and check them off before we breathe, they seem to come in like it's a never-ending stream. As Nikki talked about, and I always smile, Nikki, because we only had 30 minutes for our hearts to get to know each other. 30 minutes. And literally, we could see, hear, and feel in Nikki's heart that the boxes were in the way of her breath. And all I knew is we could not stop people from bringing their challenges, their problems to her heart. Unfortunately, in this world, many people feel that that's the reason why we have leaders. I will bring my problems and my challenges to you. That's not necessarily true once you realize that in every heart is a natural born leader. Every heart has the capacity to navigate and carry their own boxes. Every heart must, if they hope to do anything more than simply survive. And so I ask you, for all the balls around you and for all the check boxes that might be on your list, I ask you, are those all for you? If you have some that are for somebody else, I ask you to just breathe them out. Give some space between your heart and the boxes in their brain, and give them back. You can, once you are fully empowered into joy, you can from there invite that leader to navigate who they are as a leader, to overcome all of their challenges, to check all the boxes with greater ease as a partner with you, enjoy side by side, but not overburdened in their struggle, carrying your boxes and theirs. So I invite you to breathe them out, to realize, if nothing else, that if you know how to love yourself, then you know you are not designed to carry somebody else's boxes. Your heart is worth far more than that. And that's where we really elevate and activate. We ignite that self-love is a perpetual mechanism of empowerment in each heart. It allows you, once tapped into, to move you from the core of who you are as an authentic leader. What does this really mean? It means that you have the capacity to inspire yourself forward because you know how to grow, because you love yourself. You know how to partner with other hearts because you love yourself. And you know how to create and co-create with other leaders because you love yourself. That this is in fact how we can now move through this world. And I know that this might feel like a big ask during the midst of what seems like a never-ending global pandemic. But the truth of the matter is the world is changing, and the world desperately needs to change. I'm not certain that we even want it to stop. What I do invite you to is to breathe into the relevance of your own joy as a pathway for navigating all of what feels like change all around you. That will give you a pathway in which your heart can smile at you still becoming you. It allows your heart to activate the best of you inside of yourself so that you can come to the world and co-create for the change that needs to be continuously done. This is a different model for how we think about leadership, because I'm not inviting you to be somebody else's version of a leader that you never were. I'm not inviting you to subscribe to somebody else's image of a leader that you are not. I'm inviting you into all of you to be the leader that you are designed to be, the leader that you've already shown up as, but to name, honor, and center that version of a leader in you, and to bring you that whole heart to all the work that needs to be done in this world. As I mentioned before, we talked about that corporate mindset and those unspoken rules. In this journey into joy, when I was invited into it back in 2020, I realized that there was an opportunity to go deeper into my breath. And as I did that, I found out that I could center myself and my heart and my humanity and these rules of the corporate mindset. All of a sudden, they started to fade away. I didn't have to turn towards the struggle to fight them. I didn't have to dig into my brain to strategize around leadership is top down, but yet I'm expected to do amazing things every day. There's little room at the top for leaders, but I need access to my whole breath. Good employees are to fit into the culture of the organization, but as you can see, I've got big joy, and that's pretty hard to fit into any organizational culture. Employees are to toe the company line, and I feel like I have to go work out and do some additional sit-ups or jumping jacks or something so I can pull the weight of the company forward. Fear and stress are good motivators for performance, when I've never found that to be true in my evolution. Work comes first and my personal stuff stays at home. Then how am I ever to be whole enough to bring the wholeness of my heart and the magic that I have inside to the world so that we can co-create and transform for a better world? And here are the two that always took my breath away. Conflict is a problem. Conflict is defined by anyone, for whatever reason, for their past traumas, their past struggles. Conflict is defined as a problem. And therefore diversity is a burden. These are the rules of the corporate mindset. So take note, which rules are in the way of your breath?
Dr. Black asked a very compelling question, which is what rule or rules are in the way of my breath? And I would have to say there are quite a few, and I know I won't have an opportunity to share all of those things that take my breath away, but I think that rules that seemingly serve others take my breath away. Work that appears to be redundant, that is meeting another need of an organization or a person, like busy work, like when you're documenting and you have to document the same information in several different places, that takes my breath away. And I know, and I'm a person who used to support home visitors and others in documentation. And I used to always say, if you didn't document, you didn't do it. But I don't want documentation for the sake of documentation or redundancy. I want it to tell a story. So I can almost feel myself tensing up, even thinking about those rules that take my breath away. I also can feel myself holding my breath when I'm even thinking about how to respond to this question. And I'm sure many of you have the same kind of experiences from time to time. That's just the nature of the work that we do. But I think something else that takes my breath away is leadership from the top down versus a collaborative leadership approach to our work together, that we are supporting everyone to lead in their own areas of competencies and responsibilities and expertise. So that's something else that takes my breath away when leaders or staff or colleagues or however we want to call them, I also include parents with that, don't have authority, autonomy, and the freedom to be and contribute what they want to contribute. Those are some things that take my breath away. So without, belaboring the point at all, there are things that impact all of our lives, but there are also things that bring us immense joy. And when I can decrease those rules, those things that cause me to catch my breath, it really allows me to have much more joy in my workplace alongside of my colleagues across the field, and partners across the field. And so you can tell the difference. I'm joyful thinking about those things that don't take my breath away versus the things that do take. What a great question. Thank you.
Cynthia, what a just an excellent example. I mean, number one, documentation. From documentation, which feels like a burden, which feels like somebody's watching me, but feels like a task I must do in order to prove, as you said, that I did anything, versus the opportunity to tell a story. And there's breath when I receive it that way. And even if I understand it in your work, right, Educare, if I understand this invitation to move towards storytelling, what happens for me is it reminds me of who I was when I was on the playground, before anybody ever put a box on my shoulders, before anybody brought their struggle to my heart. It reminds me that I was a natural storyteller. It reminds me of all the other people who like used to direct plays in the community. Perhaps you were that leader for your family, and that brought you great joy. That was actually your heart in action. That was you being inspired by your own sense of self-love. And now we can have more space to bring that into the organization, not because of rules of corporate mindset and the pressures that come with that, all those rules, and the number of people who are operating out of those rules, because that's sometimes the sort of full weight on your shoulders, or all the people who seem to be out of breath, needing, must, when I already know in my heart, I can, and will do, and would love to, and would be overjoyed to move in this direction. So on the brighter side of leadership, these are the rules for your heart to be free in every breath. And just as Cynthia showed oh so well, I mean, you all know I've watched that video a few times now, correct? And the truth of the matter is every time Cynthia smiles to name her own joy, I go straight to my joy. And that's the power of owning and honoring your joy within. So these rules give you breath. I am hoping, and joy I am offering. I am inviting your heart into a world in which everyone is a leader and can lead from where they are at, where there's plenty room at the top for all leaders at all levels of the organization, for good organizations to build a culture that fits all of their leaders. It's way more fun. And for leaders to actually challenge the status quo, it's actually called innovation. It's called growth. We cannot have this weaponized any longer. Where leading through joy truly does inspire everyone to higher levels of performance, reminding us of who we are in our own hearts. And leaders are always to bring their whole self to the work. In this model, here's the brilliance. Conflict, never a burden. Conflict, always an opportunity for you to bring your whole heart, the wisdom in your heart, because you know how to love your heart differently than I know how to love mine. We bring those truths together, and that's how we move forward into co-creation. One of my sayings that I always have with anybody who truly knows me is I'm even a little bit socially awkward. Now here I am, I can do presentations. I'm actually an introvert inside. I'm not the extrovert everybody thinks I am. I just have big joy inside my heart to share. The reality is that I get excited about conflict and challenge. And so while other people are going, oh my goodness, there's a wall, I'm going, oh my goodness, there's a window. Let's climb through. But that's the invitation of my heart to yours. There are other leaders who go to different spaces and places that are still filled with opportunity that take conflict into new spaces of growth for us to move together. And in that world, your diversity, every ounce of who you are is an absolute strength. In fact, it's a joy. And so that's where we can greet one another with open hearts. And that's where we can remain curious about learning how our hearts move together. And in each child, what is the spark that allows that heart to grow? And as one mother said in the introductory videos, to flourish. So much so that now her heart is smiling for the brilliance, the vibrance, I believe she named, what we call the radiance of her child's heart in joy. So that is really the opportunity for your heart to release these rules that take your breath and embrace the rules that give your heart breath. So I invite you to take a breath on that. And as you do that, stop working for joy. Stop. What does that really mean, though? I am actually saying to you, stop working to get to joy in the evening. Because we know it doesn't always happen, does it? Why? Because people show up with boxes and there's always checklists to accomplish. As even we heard some of those parents begin to name, I've got to go get the groceries, I've got to go to work, I've got to do these things. So I do appreciate you, Educare, for the support that you have in my life. But we need you to stop working to get to joy one day. And instead, let the joy in your heart, the wisdom of your own self-love and action, let that empower you through the day. Just think about how your day would feel differently to wake up in joy. I mean, before you open the email and before you start doing the checklist, sit and breathe. Let your heart go to joy. Reignite the smile and wonderment, the curiosity of your own inner child, and let that light and love come back in. Now move. And you'll find yourself moving through the world in an entirely different breath. It's what I call different side of the same breath. Different side, same breath. One, I can breathe and I can have my breath quenched or squelched and turn towards somebody else's struggle. The other one, I can become fuller in my breath, and I can therefore create space for my heart to be relevant in this world. And with my heart ignited, radiate joy outwards and empower self and others with greater ease. This is what we mean by letting your joy work for you. Or as I know, Cynthia, you would say, to let that story work for you. Be excited about how you're going to tell the story. Be excited about how you telling the story the way you know how to tell the story is going to empower another leader to really understand the journey of that child's heart growing. So we stop trying to get there and we understand that we activate everything within us to know that we have it already. So on this journey into joy, if you're still with me, keep breathing. I want you to know that joy is the data from the other half of your soul. The other half of your soul. What am I saying? Well, we've talked about that corporate mindset, and I kind of pointed to my brain up here a few times. The rules of the corporate mindset take us actually into our brains, and that's what pulls us out of breath because we fall out of our hearts. Joy is the data in our hearts and how you know how to move through the world, being and bringing your best self to it. That is the gap between you out of breath and trying to get that documentation done and you fully in your heart and telling the best story you've ever told. That is the difference. We have to activate joy to get to that data on the other half of your soul. So you can start to think about, you can start to go back and name, breathe into your first experience of joy. Breathe all the way back into how joy operated in you on the playground. When I went on my journey back in 2020, now I was even a strengths maximizer at that time. So I knew who I was because I was strong. I still had not yet recalled my first experience of joy. And when I did, I thought, oh my goodness, it went all the way back to the second grade. And in the second grade, there was a heart of one of my peers who treated me with kindness, walked away and across the playground, treated another heart with disrespect, and then turned around and tried to come back to me and treat my heart with kindness. And I said, absolutely not. Why did you do that? I asked them, who knew I was a coach in the second grade. Who knew I could ever even get paid for it? But I tell anybody and everybody that that's when I became a coach, because I realized that that is when my heart turned on. And I remember the power of the moment. They stopped dead in their tracks. And they said, as I asked them that question, I don't know. I said, well, you have no right to go over there and treat them that way. Now, there's one way to understand that. If I'm in struggle, you might hear a fight brewing. But in joy, I was saying to that leader, you must know that they have the right to love themselves. And in your own heart, your self-love doesn't move that way. Oh my goodness. That's the power of activating that data, to hear how you've been moving, to hear how your own voice calls you up and out and into the world to say, that's what I'm trying to say. Turn towards struggle and fight. In my brain, it doesn't sound exactly the same way, does it? In my brain, it might be filled with frustration because I'm out of breath. And I see boxes and I see balls all around me and I don't have enough time to complete them. In my brain, it may even sound like anger because now I'm actually triggered by something that occurred. In my heart, it comes from love of self to love of others. And it sounds much more like an invitation for that leader to think about how to continue to grow. It's really only that we've been taught not to go for joy, but instead to go to happiness. Remember, I suggested happiness is all things outside of you. That is why if you try to always go about and live and lead through the world trying to make yourself happy, it never stacks up. You can get to a happy moment, but that doesn't lead to a happy life. Why? Because it does not sustain. It's like a sugar high, a sugar rush. So you can navigate a moment of struggle by trying to eat a donut to make you feel a little bit better. But that donut, it really only lasts for that brief moment. It's not sustaining and it's not breath-giving. It's not life-giving. Joy does all of that in one single breath because it's the inward, outward expression of your self-love. So now we ask you to access your heart. Breathe. Let's take a breath. Number one, for your heart, shoulders back. We take a second breath, so that breath goes all the way through our body. And we take a third breath for our soul. That is how we access our heart. And that's how joy can become our growth motivator. If we are fully breathing into our breath, accessing our heart, then leadership is no longer in that matrix and operating by rules that somebody else's brain made up to govern our organizations. It is about us knowing that we are designed to walk into our soul. You were put on this earth, you were born to bring your heart. Knowing who you are in your heart is nobody's soft skill set. It is your inner power. And understanding how to walk through this world, becoming the full leader that you're designed to be, well, that's what all this is about. So what would you do differently? Just breathe. Go back into that breath. Think about who you are. Think about something that your heart knows it wants to do. How will you do that all while breathing? Giving yourself breath, therefore giving breath and space for others. Allowing your own sense of self-love to continue to inspire you forward. Now that's how I like to grow. So let's really tap down into what joy is and is not, because there's a lot of ways in which this culture confuses what joy truly is. Remember, joy is grounded in self-love. So it's nothing that's outside of you. Let's just talk about something like ecstasy, right? I mean, ecstasy is like going on a roller coaster ride and you get to that roller coaster ride and you're coming down on the other side and you get that thrill, that rush, that's ecstasy. That is truly for a moment. It's coming from something outside of you. It can even be something that you feel shift inside of you, but that shift is not self-love, is it? That shift is something else going on, but it's not grounded in self-love. So it's very, very fleeting. And in fact, ecstasy can be a little bit dangerous if you're thrill seeking, especially if that's a way that you're moving and living and leading through life, because then you're really going from moment to moment to moment, hoping to catch a breath in between the ups and downs of the highs and the lows. Now, exuberance is a little bit different. It's still outside of you, but it's like tapping into all the energy outside of you. So now I'm not necessarily worried about balls coming down on me, but you see there's a lot of noise out here, and the exuberance is like kind of taking all that in. But it's not actually filling my heart up. It's sort of receiving all the energy from the outside world, which you can feel inside of you. But again, it's not sustainable. It doesn't go all the way to the core of who you are. Pleasure. Now, pleasure is a little bit different. That starts to tap into something that's a little bit inside of you. The thing about pleasure is that pleasure that you experience may not be somebody else's pleasure. That's the key component of it. So pleasure is something that can be informed from within. I can decide to engage in pleasure. I can decide to ensure that I get my hair done every so often and I go get my blowout. I can decide to go get the pedicure. I can decide to ensure that I have enough time to spend with my family. Those things can bring me pleasure, right? But if I don't engage in them with self-love, then again, that pleasure is fleeting because it's not anchoring on that power mechanism. It can just sort of make me feel like there's something pleasurable in my brain. So I can go do those things, but sometimes, don't we, after we engage in things that give us pleasure, we kind of like just walk out of it like it didn't even happen. And now we still need something else. And so that's why oftentimes it's on the way to joy, but it's not joy itself. And as I've mentioned, happiness kind of operates the same way. Now, happiness can take us to a higher note, and that note is a little bit more productive than, let's say, ecstasy and exuberance or pleasure, but still yet it's not the authentic experience of self-love within inside of us because it is so externally motivated. The way to understand happiness for anybody who is actually a foodie, I always laugh because I'm not a foodie, but I know lots of leaders who are. When people who love food see their favorite food, what do? Some of you might even be doing it right now. There's a smile and there's like a little dance that occurs, right? And I love it. I can always tell when somebody's enjoying food because they start dancing. And I can smile at that. But that motivation is coming from outside of us. Think about how much motivation, how much energy we put into ensuring that somebody knows our favorite dessert, that we get our favorite meal on our birthday, that we have favorite things so that we can be happy. And that even meeting a stranger, seeing a stranger across a room, I know their happiness because now they're dancing. Imagine if we put all that energy into our inward, outward smile of who you are when you are whole. I mean, joy is your heart smiling back at you being you. Oh, did you feel the difference? Did you feel the breath? What if we moved through the world ensuring that we were tapped into our joy? What if every connection we had with a child, with a parent, with a partner, with a community member at Educare was coming through that connection? Not having to wade through balls and not having to wade through somebody else's boxes to hope to get to that which is inside of them. Because I'm going to tell you, joy doesn't go that way. Joy is inside of your heart. And so what if heart to heart, we could simply connect and say, oh, hey, I know you. That is the opportunity here. And that's why joy is so powerful and so productive. You see, that is something that goes in and it is so full, whole, and complete that you can feel all of you operating at once. It's like a chiropractic alignment. It's the best energy out there. And it's sustainable, and so sustainable that if you tap into your joy, it begins to radiate within you. And then you coming out of that corporate mindset and into that heart set, you coming from here allows you to not only access one experience of joy, but two experiences of joy, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now you are radiating joy. And you're connecting and moving through the world simply with your radiance. If you've ever seen a brilliant heart walk in the room and everybody just hearts up, then you know what I'm talking about. That leader was whole and they were in joy. And that's why your heart recognized it so quickly. So activate your joy within. And we do that through self-awareness, self-expression, and self-efficacy. You see, listen to the order of that. Corporate mindset says you are the doing first. Self-efficacy is being able to do what you say you want to do and knowing that you can do it. They put that first. And so you are not your own sense of self. You are not how you move through this world. You are their doer. And so that's how balls and boxes get in front of you. But tapped into that experience of whole self, I'm actually going to take us back because I want you to feel this one. Go back, inward, outward, of your heart smiling back at you. That is the expression of who you are when you are whole. Breathe into that. And now realize when you are in joy, there is no imposter syndrome and there's no anxiety, there's no insecurities. And do you hear the quietness of that critical voice? It's like it never existed. That's what we want you to know. Grounded in self-love, fully empowered through joy, you can tap into that authentic leadership presence. And then you have radiating influence in the world. You remember now, I said not too long ago, I'm an introvert. So I am not an extrovert running around the world knowing how to engage in that way. And oftentimes our world, quite frankly, operates on that energy. So what are us introverts to do? Well, you know what we can do is we can radiate joy. See, an introvert can radiate joy, an extrovert can radiate joy, somebody who's 89 can radiate joy, and somebody who's 2 can radiate joy. Clear as day, there is no age limit on wisdom of joy. And that's why it actually democratizes our understanding of who we are as leaders in this world in a very real and hopefully for you, empowering way. Now let's get to the second core of what we're talking about when we say self-awareness, self-expression, and self-efficacy. Remember, self-awareness is knowing your story on joy. So most people come into knowing who they are, not because of their joy, but because of what? Because of their struggle. But the struggle may not even been their struggle. It may have been something that somebody else brought to their heart. Trauma that is navigating through families brought to their heart and internalized as their own story. That's not who they are in joy. Who they are in joy is how they smiled despite that box showing up. How they still yet were able to be creative in the world despite those balls all around them. That is joy. So it's literally, remember I said, different side of the same breath. One way, I am who I am Jax because I overcame drama, trauma, struggle in my life. Do you feel the weightedness? If I had time to tell you that story, it would take 3, 4, and 5 hours, and you still wouldn't know who I was in my heart. You would know who I was because I had to survive. And that is not my truth. My truth is who I am because I know joy. And even as I think about that, well, you already know the core joy of me on the second grade, in the second grade on that playground. I already expressed my joy there. I can tell you about the time that I first flew. I can tell you about the time that I flew over my own head. I can tell you about all the experiences in life on and off the track field, I might say, on and off that track field where I flew. And once I realized that I had other data that I could tap into, and then I said, my name is Jax, the Joy Maximizer, and that's who I am in my heart. That's why I offer that language to describe the fullness and brilliance of my own heart moving forward in this world. Self-expression is how you show up. So everybody has a way in which they naturally, you know what I'm saying, you naturally do your hair a certain way. You naturally dress a certain way. There's a way in which you show up in the world that you go, yeah, this is me. And you know, when you do it, other people say, I see you even better. That is that inward, outward smile of your own heart that somebody else can see, such that it's allowing their heart to smile back at seeing you. That is self-expression. And that is a much more productive way to move through the world, because then guess what? I don't have to wade through the mask. I don't have to try and get through what seems like a decent presentation of self, but I can feel is not the whole story. I don't have to try and spend time trying to figure out the rules of the corporate mindset or some secret code out there that I just didn't learn, or some of those cultural differences and dynamics. When I present as whole, then I offer somebody else to not have to do all those things. And then you can just say, hey, Jax, I know who you are. So you shared that your heart knows how to do that. Can you do that for us? Absolutely, I'll do it, and I'll do it every time. And so it's just much more productive for you to show up as you. And it empowers you to feel more self-expressed in the world. And then the doing to be done, you will simply do it. Why? Because you love yourself and you are whole in yourself and you love being you. And when you love being you, there's all sorts of things that you'd be happy to do. And there is nothing on the resume that could possibly encapsulate the fullness of who you are when you are whole. So you will do your job, and you will do more than your job. Why? Because you will be bringing your heart to this world. And we could never sum that up on a job description like that. Once you navigate that, well, then you start to completely self-actualize, and you go on into your continuous evolution into joy, simply growing and becoming the leader that you're designed to be for an entire lifetime. And therefore, if you shift, if you change, if you go right versus left, you won't feel like you have to now become a new leader. Where in the corporate mindset, that's exactly what you're asked to do. When we look at this trends, taking the joy tracker, the joy quotient measure, we find out that leaders do not necessarily feel fully self-expressed. And that's really what the crux is in our organizations. People might have sufficient levels of self-awareness that we can power to higher levels, but we don't necessarily have the full self-expression and space to breathe, to bring self-love, to be in our hearts so that we can get to the doing to be done. But here's the thing. For those of you who are still going, I like this, I'm feeling this, I see where this is going, but you know, I still really have a lot of work to do. The future of work is not going to require you to do more. It's not going to require you to do more. It's going to require you to be more of who you are to get the work done, because it's time to transform the way that we work. So we need your heart activated and engaged with that co-creation, creativity, and innovation to say, let's do this differently and allow that different way of leading with wisdom be something that empowers us all into just being more productive and healthy human beings, getting great and amazing work done. So this is how we move from fighting to breathing with the power of joy as a mechanism for leading well. I just want to cue you in here on what this looks like and feels like for you. Just some key examples. We can make this available to you. So just breathe into this. Joy is moving from a mindset, thinking. Strategy is planning, conscious effort to define goals, to understand that it's listening to your own heart, allowing your own heart to speak back to you about pathways of getting good things done. That is actually how joy moves. So strategy, we don't have to climb into our brains and drive into battlefields to figure out how to do it. Strategy, we breathe and we sit back. And when we sit back, we give space to all that creativity to come through, and we let our hearts inspire us forward. The same thing is true about driving the work, data collection, evidence, and my favorite, accountability. Accountability moves from shifting from pressure to unapologetically moving with the wisdom of your own heart and always affirming. Now that's something I would be enjoyed to do. A normal day doesn't look like waking up into bullet points and to-do lists. A normal day starts to look like gratitude, reflection, breathing first, centering in on self, and so much so that you get clear on how best to move through the day in a way that allows your heart to ensure that it can smile back at being you. It starts to feel like when you connect with others, thinking about asking more than how are you doing today, inviting people into full conversations in their heart. My way of doing that is, how are you breathing? How are you breathing today? Let's get to the real conversation about where your heart is and how we can ensure that it knows how to stay empowered. There are different ways in which we live and lead, different side of same breath. When we go in to joy, we ensure that we navigate through the day in a way in which our hearts are tapped in and whole, fully aligned, and remain so, that we don't go to compete and conquer just because bullet points show up, that we already have scheduled wellness breaks into our day, that we already have take a breath on the calendar. Better yet, take 3 breaths that I mentioned earlier. So I asked the wonderful planning committee of all of this to talk about what gives you the breath of joy each day. And so I'm going to name some of these. So listening to others laugh and enjoying life events give me the breath of joy each day. Watching the reactions of others as they accomplish goals and tasks and give me the breath of joy. I pass the breath of self-love on by acknowledging others' success and encouraging them to notice their strengths. I mean, that just sounds like a life well lived. Perhaps you do the same. Just waking up, because so many have passed in the 2020, 22 years. Being thankful for what I have as opposed to what I do not have. That's the pivot into heart set. Waking up to daylight and seeing my family in the morning and returning home. I pass my self-love with pleasant conversations, a warming smile, and warm greetings to my families at the center. That is how simply brilliant we can move through the world and know that that is us authentically leading with our whole heart. What gives you the breath of joy each day is relationships. The long-term relationships and friendships that are at the core of my life make it easy for me to pass that same love and joy on to others. In nature, birds singing in the morning and foraging under the leaves in the afternoon, the ever-changing sky, the phases of the moon. I try to pass it on by remembering that my fellow humans are also a part of nature, and each one is a miracle. And doesn't that just allow all the hairs on your arms and your neck to just stand up and go, right, we are all connected. So when we have a knowingness of all this, then we understand that leadership can look like people breathing and trusting themselves to get the work done despite all of the changes. It can look like all people allowing the wisdom of their heart and action to guide their way forward. And it can look like leaders constantly co-creating for a better world as it continues to change, because we don't want evolution to stop. This is what joy invites you into. The leader that you are when you are in joy is required to ensure that we build a future for the best of who we can be when we all love ourselves. We just need your heart included. Thank you for all of your hearts. This is how, as we know, Nikki said, she's actually on the front page of our website. I must celebrate this with pure joy. This is how you choose joy in the midst of the storm. Thank you so very much. And I know we can open the space up for anyone who has questions.
Thank you so much, Jax. We do have one very powerful question in the Q&A, which was, during the pandemic, I completely lost touch with my joy and sense of self. How do I reconnect to both? And I'm sure the person who asked is not alone in those things.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not alone at all. Here's how you do it. You know, I talked about that self-awareness. Now, it sounds like a psychological term, but let's just really break it down. In the global pandemic, what happened is we went full out of our hearts for experiencing everything that occurred. I mean, we just went panic into our brains, right? Kind of that fight or flight mode. So to get out of there, you can't try to think your way through that. That's the biggest challenge. I would say to you, dear leader, is breathe. And the way that you find your breath is to remember how your heart smiled before the pandemic. When you remember that, then you remember that there was also a pandemic that the world experienced before this one. And then you can see all the hearts smiling past that one. And then you can now see that there's intergenerational wisdom and joy about how to navigate the global pandemic. So I'm giving you some pivots that I know sort of space in my heart that I found to keep breathing. Also, you have your own pivots that are unique to your story, because although there was a global pandemic and we did lose people that we love, the data is, when you look at joy, the data, not the struggle of it. When you look at the data on joy, the key takeaway message is that we've made it, and that there were so many hearts still living. There are still children here to serve, and that is what your heart knows how to do. And there's a side of you still being here with us, that still experience joy despite the pandemic. That you still brought your whole heart to the work despite it. That there are people whose hearts you empowered despite it. So we breathe that relevance in. You name those, you center them, and you honor them. Then you take 3 breaths. Remember, 1 for your heart, 1 for your body, 1 for your soul. Because that is where we go different side of same breath. Oh my goodness. I am so powerful that I've been able to navigate a global pandemic. And then we look at all the other hearts that are too. And we are curious about how their hearts were able to find breath in the midst of it all. What I can tell you, for some of the other hearts that I've spoken to who navigated it the same way, they were able to name that they finally were able to stay home and connect with their newborn child, which they weren't able to do because the world was moving so quickly they couldn't fit it in. They were able to name that although their loved one passed, finally they got to sort of be with them, even if it wasn't in person. They spent more time virtually with them than they would have had they been out in the world moving. They were able to name that even though they were trying to figure out how to do all this work and get the bullet points done, that they had more breath because they didn't have the 5-hour commute anymore. They had more breath because they didn't have to do all these other things anymore. So they found more space over here to like spend time with their family, eating breakfast and lunch and dinner. I have wonderful stories of families who learned more about one another. And Daryl, I'm looking, absolutely. We are fortunate to spend part of our day with young children who joyfully announce, I did it. Absolutely, absolutely. And so it's all around you. If you go through your brain fight or flight, you'll be back over here. And it is dark and it is lonely and you'll feel like just this has been too much. Go into the light of your own inner child, or better yet, start sharing it with the light of the children around you, and you'll find a different pathway that will land you in joy. And that is how we get there. And that is how we remain there, because for the leader, the dear leader who asked that question, we need you to keep transforming this world out of this global pandemic, to understand that your heart and the wisdom that you have in your heart is so relevant to who we are becoming in ways that your brain cannot even imagine. Thank you so much for that question. What a good one. Anyone else?
I do have another one. At Educare, our job is to support children and families. So how do you encourage leaders to take risks and pursue their inner dreams and joy when pressure is high and when people are carrying boxes of so many others?
So, okay, I feel like jacket all the way up. That's a great question. If you look at the brighter side of leadership, you'll see in joy, we define risk differently. So risk in the corporate mindset is like, how do I choose myself when there's so much pressure? That feels risky. Risk and joy is, how do I not ensure that I am whole first? Because doing anything else, like carrying somebody else's boxes on a battlefield of their own design, that doesn't feel like that is going to allow me to breathe, which me falling out of breath takes me out of my heart. That sounds like the biggest risk. So in joy, you keep yourself breathing forward. And guess what? You just keep bringing your heart to all the children and to all the families. And here's the thing. I know joy is, the invitation of joy might be new for your heart, but time and time again, working with leaders, it ceases to amaze me. They come back and they say, oh my gosh, I can serve thousands of people in joy. If I'm turned this way and I'm carrying the boxes and I think a risk is me taking a breath, I'm worried about serving 20. If I go into my light and I carry the whole heart of me becoming me, since I was on the playground forward, I can empower thousands of people easily. Why? Because I love doing it. So when I center my breath at the beginning of the day, better yet, the night before, I wake up and I've got my core so energized, I can serve as needed. And then nothing feels like pressure. It feels like opportunity to do the very thing that I always wanted to do, which was empower other leaders forward. It is a pivot into your heart. And even after 2 and 3 days of this wonderful series that you all have had, I invite you not to process it all through brain, process it all through heart. You'll find more space, opportunity for you to do everything in a way where there's no risk. I have no risk when I am whole. Why? Because there's no thrill seeking. There's no relying on happiness and all things outside of me. There's me knowing that this is me and that I'm designed to bring my whole heart to this world. And if I can trust myself to have done that when I was on the playground, which I did, and I can trust myself to have done that when I was 10 and when I was 15, and I just saw myself do it yesterday, then I'm not worried about doing it today. And I have no problem knowing, just not an ounce of wonder about what I'm going to do tomorrow. What am I going to do tomorrow? I don't know. I'm going to see and have the opportunity to speak with different leaders, but I'm going to be in joy. And that's what grounds me. So I hope that that gives you the pathway into joy, out of risk, back into your heart, to let it go and to continue to move forward, knowing that this life is simply about you becoming you. And that is a peaceful journey that can look much more like you growing like a flower knows how to grow than you leaping off of tall buildings and saving the world. Thank you so very much. And thank you for everyone for your comments. I know you all are starting to talk and share between. Is there time for one more, or Caroline, is that our time?
I think there is about 1 minute for one more question or noticing in the chat. I know people are starting to chime in there. there's one noticing of they find their joy in that song, This Little Light of Mine. Other people saying that this provides a really alternative way of thinking, being, and showing up in the world. Nikki said, I have no risk when I am whole.
Yes. Absolutely. And I love it, calling forward the songs. We all have a song that for whatever reason just sparks that inner light. Play that song every morning. If that is your song, be that song moving through the world. Why do anything else? You are so incredible and your heart is so needed. And we have gratitude for all that you do in this world. Never forget that. I know you all know how to show that to each other, but for those of us who are just getting to know your hearts, know that we love you. Know that we know we need the wisdom of your heart, and know that we love all that you do. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone's comments, and continue to breathe and choose joy in the midst of any storm that you feel is coming your way.
Thank you so much, Jax. And I think we will pass it over to Nikki for wrap up.
Thank you.
I told y'all she was amazing. I told you so. I told you so. Every time her and I interact, we always have this moment. And a couple weeks ago, when we had a Zoom and we were chatting, and one of the first things I said is like, my joy is my weapon. And she says, no, Nikki, your joy is your breath, because you don't have to fight anymore. And I needed that reminder. And I hope you all have that reminder that our joy is an opportunity to invite our purpose. And, I was all brain in action and I was no heart or joy, and I got nowhere. And it's exponential how I have grown and I've gone forward since choosing joy, especially in my storms. So I want to thank you all for being with us for these amazing 2.5, 3 days. I know that we have shared a lot. We have invited in vulnerability, and we have supported others in our vulnerability. I thank the planning committee, the attendees, all of the speakers. Thank you so very much for lending your time and lending your heart. Please do remember to complete all of the surveys for all of the sessions that you have gone to. That way we can continue to make this better each year. And we want to make sure that we are injecting you and what your heart needs in our next network meeting that we hope will be in person. Also, I want to call out that at 2:30, we are going to have a network meeting reflection session. I will be there, and it would be great for any of us to reflect on our joy and the opportunities that we have learned about over these 3 days. So I thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you for everything that you do all day, and I encourage you to always choose joy. Thank you.